Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are shifting gears a little bit. We're usually dissecting history or,
Yeah.
breaking down the latest tech trends, but today, today feels a lot more personal.
Mm,
We're talking about self-defense. And I don't mean karate or anything like that. I mean intellectual self-defense.
that's a beautiful way to frame it. Self-defense for the mind.
Exactly. We're diving into a really comprehensive breakdown from Sound of Philosophy, and the topic is the art of the empty claim.
Right.
Essentially, we're going to look at the toolkit people use, and that could be politicians, advertisers, even that argumentative uncle you have, to trick you into believing something without offering a single shred of proof.
It is a real pleasure to be here. I'm joining you today from Philosophy Hub, the Philosophy Cafe. And before we even start, I just want to set the tone a little.
Geez.
At the Philosophy Cafe, our whole mission is to slow down.
Yeah.
We live in this economy of hot takes, instant reactions, 15-second clips. It's exhausting, isn't it?
It really is. You feel like you have to have an opinion on everything
Yeah.
right now.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So I want to invite you, the listener, to just take a breath. Maybe pour a cup of coffee metaphorically or, literally, and join us in a slower, deeper kind of reflection. We aren't just debunking arguments today. We're looking at the very structure of how we think.
I love that.
And if you value this kind of rational space, I gently invite you to support our mission by liking and sharing this deep dive. It really does help us keep this little corner of rationality going.
Absolutely. Let's slow down and unpack this. So the central idea from the source material is fascinating. It says that apart from, self-evident truths like I'm in pain or the sun is hot, every single claim needs a reason. But giving reasons is hard work.
It's hard work and it's risky. If I give you a reason, if I say we should do X because of Y, well, I've just given you a target. You can attack Y.
Right.
But if I can trick you into agreeing with X without ever giving you Y, then I'm safe. I've won without even fighting.
So this source identifies 19 specific tricks, 19 ways to dodge the burden of proof. We have a lot to cover, so let's get into the first category. The source calls them psychological barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, how to shut down a conversation before it even starts.
The first one is blocking the path of argument. You can think of this as an immunization strategy. The speaker creates a statement that, well, it's a sentence, but logically it's a fortress. It can't be disproven.
And the source gives a great example of this with prayer.
Yes. Imagine someone says, we must pray to solve this crisis. Now just watch what happens if the crisis gets resolved, they say.
See? It was God's mercy. The prayer worked.
Exactly. But if the crisis gets worse, or if nothing changes,
Then it's God's wisdom.
it's God's wisdom we aren't meant to understand. So you see, they've created this perfect closed loop. The outcome in the real world doesn't matter at all. Their claim is totally insulated from reality.
Heads I win, tails you lose.
That's it exactly. It blocks the path to any counter-argument because they've decided in advance that they're right no matter what the evidence says.
The source also mentions the heart valve trick. I actually laughed when I read this, but it's so frustrating when you encounter it in real life.
Oh, it is. It's a classic move in certain mystical or ideological circles. You ask for a logical reason for their belief, and they look at you with this kind of pitying smile and say,
Oh, logic is too cold for this. You have to open the valves of your heart to understand.
right. It's a total shutdown. And it's designed to make you feel like you're the one who's broken.
Yes.
The source has this wonderful retort for it. My heart valve's defective. Can you give me a logical reason instead? But the psychological trick is shifting the defect. They're saying the problem isn't that I have no proof. The problem is that you aren't spiritual enough to get it.
That leads perfectly into the second fallacy, which is even more aggressive, I think. Every school child knows.
This is just pure bullying. It's a shaming tactic. It's meant to artificially inflate the certainty of a claim by mixing a fact with an opinion to make them seem identical.
Like saying, every school child knows that 2 times 2 is 4, just as everyone knows we must raise taxes to save the economy.
Exactly. 2 times 2 is 4 is a mathematical axiom. Raising taxes, it's a deeply complex economic policy with all sorts of pros and cons. But by gluing them together and saying it's obvious, I'm daring you to disagree.
Because if I question the tax policy, you've made me feel like I'm questioning basic math.
You are. The source actually uses a heavier political example, something like, it is obvious Russia had to attack Ukraine.
Wow.
By using the word obvious, the speaker is trying to induce fear. We're social animals, We don't want to be the odd one out. So if something is obvious to everyone else and you don't see it, you feel stupid. It suppresses the question why before you can even ask it.
Okay, so the first step is to stop you from even asking. The next section deals with preemptive strikes, manipulating the audience before the argument even begins. First up is poisoning the well.
This one is incredibly common in any polarized society. You discredit the opposition before they even open their mouths.
Like saying only a traitor would oppose this reform.
Or everyone reads the great poets, except for those who are, alien to our culture. If you're about to disagree, you've just been preemptively labeled a traitor or an alien.
You haven't even spoken yet.
You're dead on arrival. The source uses the story of the emperor's new clothes to illustrate this, and it's perfect. We all remember the naked king, but do you remember the specific condition the tailor set?
I think so.
Yeah.
Didn't they say the clothes were invisible to anyone who was illegitimate or stupid?
Specifically, they said the clothes were invisible to anyone who was not legitimate, or in the context of the source, halal-born. Now that is the ultimate poisoning of the well. The crowd didn't cheer for the naked king because they were blind. They cheered because they were terrified of being labeled illegitimate. The tailors poisoned the well so thoroughly that telling the truth became a huge social liability.
But there's a flip side to this, isn't there? The source calls it trap laying. It's like a reverse poison.
Yes. Instead of insults, you use flattery. It's a honey trap.
The example that really stuck out to me was the one between a parent and a child. A good kid listens without asking why.
It's manipulative genius, isn't it? If the child asks why, well, they've just admitted, by the parent's own definition, that they aren't a good kid. They're trapped by their desire for approval.
Or the example of the borrower who says, I know you're generous and classy enough to lend you 50 million tomans.
A very dangerous one. It frames compliance as a virtue. If you say no, you aren't just protecting your bank account. You're admitting you lack class. You're completely trapped by your own ego.
Okay, let's move into some deeper water. Section 3 is about the burden of proof and dealing with the unknown. This feels like where a lot of internet arguments go to die. The appeal to ignorance.
The classic form is, we haven't seen it, so it doesn't exist. Or, on the flip side, you can't prove it doesn't exist, so it must be real.
The source uses the example of aliens. Someone claims aliens don't exist simply because we haven't seen them yet.
Which is, well, it's just arrogant when you consider the scale of the universe. In a universe with billions of galaxies, our lack of a sighting, our ignorance, is not proof of absence. It just means we haven't looked everywhere.
Sure.
However, and this is a really crucial nuance that the Philosophy Cafe perspective brings in, sometimes an absence of evidence is evidence of absence.
Okay, could you explain that? When is not seeing something actually proof?
When we should have seen it. The source uses the historical example of the splitting of the moon, or Shak al-Qamar. The argument is that if the moon had physically split in half a couple of thousand years ago, it would have been a massive global astronomical event.
Right. Astronomers in China, and in India, in Greece, they were watching the sky all the time.
Constantly. If the moon split, they would have recorded it. It would be in the history books of every major civilization on Earth. The fact that the historical record in those places is silent, the fact that they didn't see it, well, that's actually valid evidence that it didn't happen as a global physical event.
I see.
That's not an appeal to ignorance. It's an appeal to an expected record.
That's a really helpful distinction. So if I lose my keys, not seeing them on the table doesn't mean they don't exist. But if I claim there's an elephant in this room and we don't see it,
Then the elephant probably isn't here.
got it. Okay, closely related to this is the trick of demanding proof from the opponent.
The playground tactic. No, you prove it. If someone claims, say, life after death exists, and you ask for evidence, they can't just retort, well, can you prove it doesn't exist?
Because that shifts the burden of proof.
Correct. The person making the positive claim, the one saying X exists, always carries the burden of proof. You can't demand someone prove a negative just to validate your own assertion.
All right, moving on to section 4. Structural deceptions. These are tricks built right into the architecture of the argument. The most famous one is probably the false dilemma.
The black or white trap. The source mentions a strict law, specifically about the mandatory hijab. The argument presented is, this is the law, either accept it or leave the country.
It sounds so final, like those are the only two choices in the entire universe.
But it's a lie. It completely erases the entire spectrum of reality. It ignores the third option, staying and working to change the law. It ignores the fourth option, staying and protesting. It ignores a fifth option, a sixth, By narrowing the entire world to just two choices, submission or exile, the speaker tries to force you into a corner.
Then there's repetition, or ad nauseum. This is just wearing people down, right?
Yeah.
It is. Psychology tells us that if we hear something enough times, our brains start to tag it as familiar. And we often confuse what's familiar with what's true. The Source has this great example of a movie review where the speaker just keeps saying, "It deserves an Oscar, it's head and shoulders above the rest, it's a masterpiece."
But they never actually say why. They don't mention the lighting or the script or the acting.
No, they're substituting frequency for facts.
The next one, I have to admit, made me laugh because I've definitely been guilty of it. Pedantry, or what the Source calls Faisal-Farushi showboating.
This is using complexity to mask insecurity. The example given is a debate where one friend keeps quoting Arabic verses to a non-Arabic speaker, and when the other person says, I don't speak Arabic, the response is, just let me finish, I'll translate for you.
It's a total power move. It establishes dominance.
It is. But, true knowledge always seeks clarity, not confusion. If I'm explaining a concept at the Philosophy Cafe, my goal is to make it as simple as possible. If I'm hiding behind big words or obscure jargon, it's often because my actual argument is too weak to stand on its own.
Speaking of weak arguments hiding behind things,
Yeah.
let's talk about numbers. Misleading quantification.
Numbers feel so objective, don't they? They feel like hard facts, but they can be the biggest liars of all.
Right.
The Source gives the example of someone saying, my wealth increased 100%.
That's amazing.
Until you find out they went from having $1 to $2. Without context, the percentage is meaningless. Or there's the meaningless calculation like 1 hour of breathing is worth 6 months of life. What does that even mean? It sounds profound, but it's just mathematical gibberish.
My favorite, or I guess my least favorite, was the fake statistic. I saw with my own eyes that 9 out of 10 Iranians wear black during Muharram.
Yes. Just think about that for a second. Iran has nearly 90 million people. To know that 9 out of 10 do anything, you would need a massive systematic survey. Seeing it with your own eyes means you looked at the 100 people on your street.
It's turning a personal anecdote into a fake statistic.
Exactly. And it's used to shut down disagreement.
We're about halfway through, and I'm already thinking about how many of these I fall for. Let's get into the heavy stuff. Section 5, Emotional and Linguistic Manipulation. This is where language gets weaponized. First up is loaded language.
This is a subtle one. It's about how we name things. The Source contrasts how media describes protests. When it's domestic unrest the government dislikes, they might call the people rioters, agitators, or agents of chaos. But when they're looking at similar protests, say, in France...
They're people on the street, citizens, protesters.
Exactly. Or take the war in Ukraine. Russia legally mandated the term special military operation. Calling it a war was a crime. Why? Because the word war carries an emotional weight that special operation just doesn't.
The Source also mentioned the difference between putting an atheist on trial versus an infidel or kafir.
That's a very high-stakes example. Atheist describes a philosophical position, but infidel or kafir describes a moral crime, a betrayal. If you call the defendant an infidel, you have already convicted them in the minds of the jury before any evidence is even shown. The word itself does the arguing for you.
Then we get to the appeal to emotion. This is when you just stop thinking and start feeling.
Right. The Source gives a geopolitical example. A government might justify funding conflicts abroad by broadcasting these heart-wrenching images of war-torn children.
Which is tragic. I mean, nobody wants to see children suffer.
It is undeniably tragic, but the fallacy is in using that tragedy to silence domestic questions. It completely ignores the logic of why a country's own citizens, who might be struggling with poverty and 1,000 of their own problems, should bear that specific cost. It replaces a policy debate with a jolt of pity.
And that connects to the pragmatic fallacies: threat, bribery, and pity.
The Source groups these together because they're all about practical outcomes, not truth. Eat your vegetables or you can't play is a threat, not a nutritional argument.
Vote for my project and you'll get a bonus. That's bribery, not a merit-based argument.
And the appeal to pity in the courtroom, the criminal asking for mercy because I have a wife and children.
Yeah.
It pulls at your heartstrings, but does it prove he didn't rob the bank? No. It's completely irrelevant to the truth of the claim, but it's highly effective on our psychology.
Before we move on to the final section, I just want to say, if you're finding value in this breakdown, if it's helping you see the strings of the puppet show a little clearer, please do consider sharing this deep dive. The Philosophy Cafe is built on the idea that rationality can be contagious.
Indeed. We are entering the final stretch now, section 6, distorting reality. These feel less like cheap tricks and more like profound cognitive errors. The first one is wishful thinking.
This one really hit home for me.
It hits home for all of us, and I want to take a moment here, because this one is just so deeply human. We so often confuse what we want to be true with what is true. The source gives a political example.
Right.
Officials claiming winter is hard for Europe, predicting that gas shortages would force the West to the negotiating table.
They wanted it to be true so badly.
They needed it to be true, but reality doesn't really care about our political needs. A mild winter and alternative energy sources. They proved the wish wrong, but the source also goes deeper, and this is where it gets more philosophical. It suggests that the belief in an afterlife or in divine justice often stems from this fallacy.
That's a bold claim.
It is. The logic goes like this. We humans have a deep innate need for justice. We hate seeing bad people get away with things, and we're terrified of ceasing to exist. So because we want justice and eternity so badly, we assume another world must exist to provide it. The expert in me and the voice of the Philosophy Cafe sees this not as a critique of faith, but as a reminder. Just because you desperately want something to be true doesn't mean the universe is obligated to provide it.
That's a heavy thought to sit with. Okay, next is demagoguery, or mob appeal.
This is about manipulating the atmosphere of a crowd. The classic example cited is Hitler and the big lie. If you repeat a lie often enough and loudly enough to a crowd that's already angry and looking for a scapegoat, they will believe it.
Right.
Blaming the Jews for all of Germany's problems wasn't based on economic data. It was based on feeding the mob's existing hatred. It's the dark side of emotional intelligence.
Then there's the appeal to false authority. We see this all the time in commercials, an actor in a white coat selling toothpaste.
Exactly. But in the intellectual world, it's more subtle. The source describes a debate on Islamic economy versus the free market. One side kept quoting a religious leader, Imam Khomeini, on economic matters.
And the opponent asked the right question. Was he an expert in economics?
A valid, crucial question. Being a religious authority, or a physicist, or a famous general, that doesn't automatically confer expertise in macroeconomics. Relying on the wrong authority is a sign you lack arguments of your own. You're just borrowing someone else's prestige.
And finally, number 19. The source calls this one reification. This sounded most abstract to me, but also maybe the most dangerous.
It is abstract, but its consequences are bloody. Reification is treating a concept as if it were a living, concrete thing.
Can you give us the example from the source?
Yes. The source uses the example of the system or the regime Nasueam.
Right. You hear officials justifying terrible actions to preserve the system.
Think about that phrase, the system. What is it? It's just a concept. It's an arrangement of rules and bureaucracy meant to help people live together. It has no blood, no nerves, no soul. But when you reify it, when you treat the system as a real entity that is more important than the actual flesh and blood humans it is supposed to serve,
you end up in a moral disaster. You justify killing real people to save an imaginary thing.
Precisely. You starve people, you silence them, you kill them, all to protect the system. You have elevated an abstraction above reality. That is reification. It's not just a grammar mistake. It's the root of totalitarianism.
Wow. When you put it that way, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
It really shows that these fallacies aren't just for winning debates online. They actually shape history.
They do. And that's why we do these deep dives.
So we've unpacked 19 different ways that people, politicians, advertisers, even ourselves, dodge the responsibility of actually proving their claims.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, to the mission of the Philosophy Cafe, it's all about empowerment. Critical thinking is self-defense. It's about protecting your own mind from manipulation, whether it's the appeal to emotion, making you vote against your own interests, or wishful thinking, keeping you in denial about a crisis. These fallacies have real-world costs.
It really makes you realize that asking why, or how do you know that, it isn't being rude. It's being necessary.
It is the most patriotic, the most human, the most intelligent thing you can do. And remember, we're all susceptible. I catch myself using these shortcuts, too. The goal isn't to be perfect, it's just to be aware.
Well, I'm definitely going to be listening a lot more carefully to the news and to my own heart valves after this.
As you should.
If you enjoyed this journey into the anatomy of the empty claim, please consider supporting the Philosophy Cafe. A simple like or share goes a long, long way in helping us spread a little bit of rationality in a confused world.
Thank you for lending us your ears and your minds. Keep questioning.
See you in the next deep dive.